Welcome to the DSPN.
John Walker wins the 1500 metres gold medal at the Olympic Games.
The All Blacks have won by 29 points tonight.
The Devlin Sports Podcast Network.
Welcome to the podcast, people. Martin Devlin, Lachlan Waugh and RRM, a rugby review Monday. Tony Johnson from Sky Sport joining us to look back at Super Round 4. Chris Jones from the UK, as we've just got one round to go in the Six Nations, and Ireland absolutely walloped by France. What does that tell us about who rules up that end of the world? Plus, we'll look at the Champions Trophy final and how disappointing that was for the Black Caps. India did it too easy in the end, and no Matt Henry for us, probably the killer. Rahul Patel joining us as well. Again, if you like what you're listening to and what you're watching on the DSPN YouTube channel, the best, most productive way that you can help us is to hit the subscribe button on the YouTube channel. It really does help. We want to get to 5,000 subscribers. We're so awfully close now. Every time you do it or tell somebody else that you know to do it, it does. It does work. This side of the microphone for us, big time. If you're listening on Rover or wherever you find your favourite podcast, you can also listen on Spotify, Google, Apple Play, all of that. We put a hell of a lot of clips out all across social media. That's Instagram, Facebook and TikTok. And if you like those clips, then you can listen to the interviews as a whole show package. That is just audio, where you find your podcast, or in bite-sized chunks, individual chunks on the DSPN YouTube channel. We begin the show the same way every day.
We live in an amazing, amazing world, and it's wasted on the crappiest generation of just spoiled idiots.
Just another superb round of Super Rugby. And we seem to be saying that every week at the moment, which in fact we have done every week since opening round, because it is. Because it has been. So what do we learn from round 4? I think first up, exactly that. The product, for want of a much better word. I hate that word product, but let's use, comp. The comp is excellent right now. You cannot argue with the entertainment value being offered. Honestly, if you can't agree, then might I politely suggest you get off your Grinch pills, because this has been the best start to a Super Rugby season probably ever. Certainly since anyone can really remember. And, well, you tell me, when was a better one? We learned that even the odds makers, the bookies, those whose nuts in the form of cash bets, profit loss, prediction to payout ratios, they don't really know. This weekend alone, 3 good size upsets out of the 5 matches. If you took a trifecta on the Brumbies, Drua and MP all to win, you would have had a very tidy collect indeed. The competition, as well as being highly entertaining, is also becoming brilliantly unpredictable. You need upsets. You need against the odds wins. That's what keeps interest and anticipation alive. Now, rugby is a mostly predictable, back the favourite kind of sport. It doesn't produce a huge lot of fairy tale runs or results. This year's Super Rugby, though, is bucking that trend. Finally, we learned that the New Zealand sides have plenty of work to do. It is not another here we go cakewalk 5 Kiwi teams in the top 6 formality that many of us, including myself, pre-season expected and predicted. No one had the Blues 1-3 after 4 games. The defending champs were, for most of us, an absolute lock to finish first or second. And on paper, that's where they should be in the table, first or second. Yet right now, they're at the bottom of the table, and they are a dodgy scrum penalty versus the Hurricanes away from being 0-4. In effect, from being last year's Crusaders. Now let's see if the mainstream media start putting Vern Cotter under the same Rob Penny microscope then. You know that's not going to happen. You know why it's not going to happen. They all signed broadcasting partnership deals with these teams. They won't be doing that. The Crusaders were in fact the only New Zealand team to win this weekend, and they were pretty impressive too, thrashing the Reds in Christchurch. But back to the Blues and Hurricanes, who both deserve to cop it right now, and big. The resources, player strength and depth, the preparation and privilege of these two teams demand so much more than what we've initially seen. Both should be highly embarrassed about where they're at. The Blues have thrown away 2 games, Highlanders and Brumbies, by nothing other than their own incompetence and ineptness. Botching your own lineouts with minutes to go is inexcusable for a side with that kind of talent. With the amount of All Black experience on the field, the inability to execute the most basic of basic drills is inexplicable. They need a rocket. As well do the Hurricanes. They've also won just 1 of 4. And that win being a final few minutes victory against a Drua side that we've since learned were transported in the back of a luggage truck to the game and kicked out of their hotel 5 hours before kickoff. They had to lounge around in reception. You know how tiring that can be. Whereas the Hurricanes players who boarded a nice luxury coach to the same hotel were given a late checkout that day where they didn't have to leave their rooms till an hour before kickoff. No wonder the Drua players were tired and weary and lost their legs in the last 10 minutes in Napier. Now, the Canes have been soundly beaten on the weekend by Moana Pacifica. Both these Kiwi teams deserve to wear it, no matter how much those words might hurt at the moment. They are failing. They need to be told that. Professional sport is about winning. It's not about turning up and playing. It's winning. And right now, the Blues and the Hurricanes teams deserve a serve. Hopefully, the criticism stings both into action. Next, we're going to have our Super Rugby rankings. We've got where the teams sit officially on the points table. This is how we see it as we count backwards from 11 to 1.
Devlin.
Super Rugby rankings then, round 4. These are according to me. Lachlan may argue along. The official table goes Chiefs, Tars, Highlanders, Crusaders, Reds, Brumbies, Force, Drua, MP, Blues, Canes. We're going to start from 11 and work our way through to number 1 this week. So the Blues are officially 10th on the table and the Canes are 11. But I've got them the other way round in my rankings. I start with the Blues. Bottom of the table, they're 1 and 3. I had them at 6 last week. The only win is against the Canes, and the reason that I've got them at the bottom and not the Hurricanes, whose only win is against the Drua, after the poor old Drua had to travel in a cattle truck and then get kicked out of the hotel early. The only reason is because that Blues side, as you say, Lachlan, to whom much is given, much is expected, they should be a hell of a lot better than what they are. And they are botching the most basic fundamental aspects of rugby, losing lineouts off their own throw at the end to lose games with a whole lot of All Blacks. I'm putting them at 11 because they should be ashamed of where they are.
Disagree. Ashamed is a bit of a strong word. I will criticise the Blues for that record. 1 and 3 is not good enough.
And when you've
got that depth, you should be better.
Yeah.
13 players they were missing heading into that game on Friday.
Boo-hoo.
They're now missing 15. Now, Beauden Barrett was playing pretty well in the first half. I don't think his absence... Hold up, let me finish. I don't think his absence is an excuse or a fair excuse because Harry Plummer filled in that role and he was the first 5 in the final last year and the second half of the season for you last year. So I don't think there's too many excuses, but they're missing pretty much all their starting loose forwards, missing some key forwards.
Get over it.
I'm just saying,
get over it.
How can you put them behind the Canes? They beat the Hurricanes.
I'm putting them behind the Canes.
Well, they beat the Hurricanes.
Because they've got a much better squad on paper. They're the defending champs and they should be doing a lot better. But,
injuries?
But look,
they beat the Hurricanes.
I'm putting the Canes there because I'm a Canes fan. And the Canes have only beaten the Drua.
So you admit that you're
these are my rankings, mate.
Oh, okay.
So that's 11 and 10. At 9, MP. I had them at 11 last week. Their only winners against the Hurricanes. They've had a couple of close ones. They're also 1 and 3.
Now, to Martin Pacific's credit, they were very, very good on Saturday. They were a brilliant mix. I thought the first 5, Pellegrini was superb as well. But they had a great mix of physicality, but disciplined physicality. And there was a lot of spark in the back. They looked in the start of that second half. Seriously, Martin Pacifica, well done. You looked really, really good in that second half to start with.
And also did a whole half without Artie, of course.
Yep.
But they built upon that. They built upon that by keeping the Highlanders scoreless in that second half.
Yeah.
So they progressed, okay? They were leaking 100 points in the first 2 games. This is real progression. Delighted with that. In at 8, I've got the Force. Now, I had them at 5 last week. They'd beaten MP. They'd beaten the Brumbies away. But they were dealt to by New South Wales. Dealt to. And I think that was the big come back to earth with a thump. So I've got them at 8. They're 2 and 2.
I've got the Force at 7. The Drua are 8 for me, and
they're actually 8th in the table,
and it's purely a record thing. Drua are 8th and Force are 8th. Force is 7th on the table as well. It's purely a record thing. Because I still think the Force have a lot of quality. Yes, they lost to the Waratahs, who are firming is probably the best.
By the Waratahs.
Okay. The Waratahs are firming as the best team in Australia because the Reds got beaten pretty bad.
Well, they've won all 3, and we're going to talk about this. They've won all 3 games at home, the Waratahs. They haven't gone away yet, and they've had a bye.
They're 3-0 though.
Okay, I know. So I've got the Drua at 7. I mean, you could interchange, but I've got the Drua at 7.
I get your point about that they've lost those 3 games at the death and they could have won them. At the end of the day, they did lose them though.
At the end of the day, Auckland have lost 3 games, and you can talk about injuries.
No, I know, and their 1 win was over the Hurricanes, so they should be ahead of the Hurricanes in your rankings.
The Drua is 7. Anyway. They were 10 last week. They beat the Chiefs. They've lost the other 3 by 5 or less, all at the death as well, And when you hear the disgraceful treatment that they got in Napier with the travel and the hotel and everything else, but that win against the Chiefs, Lachlan, was thoroughly deserved. Now, I watched that game, and you were texting me at the same time. You said your flat erupted when they scored that try, which was effectively the clinching try.
The chip kick from the midfield, from the middle of the 50-metre line, yeah.
That ground is now a fortress, Lautoka. They won all 6 games last year. They won there again. I don't know anyone outside of Chiefs Mana territory didn't want the Drua to win that game.
It was just a superb watch. I thought it was funny. The score the Chiefs, I think, lead 17-13 at one point, if memory serves correct. And I just sat there talking to my flatmates. I said, I don't know, it feels like the Chiefs are actually playing pretty well here. That score should be bigger. And we sort of talked as if the Drua are the type of side that they'll have spurts of excellence, and that's just enough to win a game. And sure enough, that sort of happened. You're not saying the Drua weren't good, they were very good. But that was, again, it sort of evened the competition a bit,
I thought if any team was going to fall away at the end, it would be the Drua. I didn't think it was going to be the Chiefs that would fall away at the end.
Well, the conditions do not favour the Chiefs.
I know
at
the
all.
Chiefs scored the last
did
try.
you see some of those Kiwis in the crowd who were just sweating?
That's the whole time, wasn't it, the fans?
Those Chiefs Hawaiian shirts look quite cool as well, actually.
And at 6, the Reds 2-1. I had them at 3 last week. They beat MP, they beat the Force, and they won in Perth, which is great. But they lost to the Crusaders badly yesterday afternoon with a depleted side. Afternoon rugby, absolutely superb. But the Crusaders smacked them up, which is why I've got them at 4. And I'll explain, they could actually be at 3.
Yeah, I've got Crusaders 3.
They beat the Reds. They lost badly to the Chiefs. They beat the Hurricanes. I still don't know where this Crusaders team is at.
Well, I'm just sort of looking at the table here and looking at some numbers and whatnot. I've said this personally a lot, and I think you've agreed with me to an extent. That loss to the Chiefs, I'm not going to say it flattered the Chiefs, but I don't think it unflatters the Crusaders too much, because for about 55, 60 minutes, they were in the game and they were playing well, and then, backs against the wall and they just fell apart.
Yeah.
The opening round against the Hurricanes, great second half, and then, of course, against the Reds yesterday, they just scored tries at will in the first half. Ethan Blackadder was great. Will Jordan was great as well. Sevu Reece, everyone played pretty well for the Crusaders. That halfback Preston is probably the I don't want to say the Cinderella story, but you could, if there's a player Cinderella story, he's certainly one of them in Super Rugby. The Crusaders, I think, they're unfinished.
I've got to actually go back as well, because I put the Crusaders in at 4, but I put the Highlanders in at 5, and I could interchange these two teams. I've got to talk about the Highlanders, and my bad there. I had them at 4 last week. They beat the Blues, they beat MP, narrow loss to NSAA, and they've had that bye. Big test for them this weekend, obviously against the Hurricanes. The Highlanders, that's the measuring stick for them. If they get a win there, then they are legit, and they are absolutely for a top 6 spot. But I mean, the Highlanders and the Crusaders, I could interchange at 4 and 3. I got the Brumbies at 3. Sorry, at 5 and 4. Brumbies at 3, 2 and 2. Beat the Drua and the Blues away. Lost to the Force and the Chiefs. But that draw that the Brumbies have had, they lost at home to the Force, but playing at Eden Park, playing the Chiefs in Hamilton, playing the Drua at Lautoka, in Fiji, they played at Suva, didn't they? They've won 2 big games, is my point. They've won at Eden Park and they've won in Fiji, and stuff all teams in this competition are going to win those 2 games. And so that's why I've got the Brumbies at 3, even though they're only 2 and 2.
I think 3 and 4 being the Brumbies and Crusaders is interchangeable.
And the Highlanders 3, 4 and 5. I mean, I
think the Highlanders are a smidge, because you've got to take record into it, but you've also got to sort of take into account who is the better team. And I think the Highlanders aren't as good as the Brumbies or the Crusaders.
Well,
and I'd argue that I personally think the Reds are a better side
than what we saw yesterday afternoon?
Well, for sure. And I think if they played the Highlanders right now, they would probably win.
Well, let's wait and see.
Which is why mine goes Crusaders, Brumbies, Reds, Highlanders. That's my 3 through 6. But again, like sort of that bottom 4, I think it is pretty interchangeable.
The top 2 pick themselves. New South Wales, the only unbeaten team. How about that? There's 3 Aussie teams in the top 6.
You were just bagging them, saying, they've had all 3 at home.
Yeah, well, they have, and that's why that's why they're not the number 1 side, because they've beaten the Highlanders, Drua, Force all at home, and they've won. They thrashed the Force. The first 2, they got away with it. They could easily have lost both of those games.
You can't say you got away with it, because they won the game.
They got away with it.
It's like the 2023 World Cup final. Hey, South Africa won it.
They didn't win it. They cheated their way to winning it, mate. Geez. And also the other thing, if that's the case, is the Blues are 3 and 1, and they're back at the top of the table. If that's your logic.
From what I said about the Reds just now, and it's the same with the Waratahs, big test for both teams this weekend, because they play each other in Brisbane, so whoever wins that, you've got a much better indication of where they're at. And I think, I don't know, it's early days, I'd probably lean towards the Reds in that one. But
see, we're looking forward to this round coming already.
Well, you know what else is on Saturday? It's probably the end of the Blues season
Chiefs,
if they
Blues.
can't go on the road to beat the Chiefs.
Chiefs hosting
right?
the Blues. Isn't that what a cracking game? So the Chiefs are at 1. They're still at 1. They've only lost the 1 game. They've beaten the Blues, the Crusaders and the Brumbies. 3 great wins. They've lost to the Drua. The Chiefs can... I don't think it ends the Blues season, but what it does is it says if the Chiefs win that game and the Blues are 1 and 4, the Blues aren't winning the competition.
But if the Blues can go on the road and win that, hypothetically, that's a steely defending champs type win, hypothetically.
There you go.
You've also got 2 games this coming weekend, but we're looking ahead a little bit too much here, but you've got that, which was a round one match, so you've got the reverse. You've got the Brumbies Drua as well, which is a reverse, which was a round one match.
Yeah, who does the draw?
And then Friday is probably the biggest test for the Highlanders to prove, hey, we're actually legit. We're here. Yeah. We're not as bad as you're making us out to be.
How enthusiastic are we talking about this competition?
I'm loving it.
It's brilliant, isn't it?
I'm loving it.
And the NRL was pretty damn good too, but we'll do that tomorrow.
This is the DSPN.